show now. So here we go. Everyone's ready? Sat Sri Akal, everyone. I'm Sonia Dhami, and I'm joining you from Cupertino, California. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 5th virtual tour of Sikh treasures around the world. We are unfortunately still in the midst of the pandemic. And here in California, we have also been ravaged by forest fires in the past few days. I hope you are all staying safe and as far as possible, staying home. To make it a little easier for you, we are bringing acclaimed authors, researchers, historians, conservationists, curators from all around the world to talk with us and show us glimpses of our forgotten heritage. Today, we will continue our travels in Pakistan and visit the legendary forts with Amardeep Singh, a pioneer researcher who really needs no introduction. Today, our presentation will be for a little longer than an hour than the usual. And at the end of it, we will be taking questions that you might have. So please feel free to write all your questions in the chat window, which you see on your screens. And we will keep an eye out for them, and Amardeep will answer them after the presentation is done. And most importantly, please, at this time, I request you to share this episode, this live session, by clicking the share button on your screens. And before we get started, and while people are joining in, we would like to take a few minutes to introduce the Sikh Foundation to those of you who are not familiar. Soon after its establishment, the Sikh Foundation immersed itself in literary pursuits, publishing books and journals. But the course of history, set in motion in the Punjab in the 80s, engulfed all academic and artistic ambitions for now. The weekly newspaper, the Sikh Times, was launched in 1984. Full-page advertisements in leading American newspapers were published to educate Americans about Sikhs. Pioneering the display of Sikh arts, the first Sikh art exhibit opened in 1992 in San Francisco at the Asian Art Museum. Another major initiative was the establishment of the Kundan Kaur Kapani Chair of Sikh and Punjabi Language Studies, the first of its kind at the University of California, Santa Barbara, commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Sikh Foundation. The first permanent Sikh art gallery was established at the Asian Art Museums in San Francisco in 2003. In all, 7 Sikh art exhibits supported by the foundation have been displayed at leading museums all over the world, including the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Smithsonian in DC, Rubin Museum of Art in New York, and the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. 3 chairs of Sikh studies set up by the Sikh Foundation at University of California campuses at Santa Barbara, Riverside, and Santa Cruz, and a Sikh studies program at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley are amongst the 6 endowed chairs and numerous programs running all over the United States with the support from the community. These chairs and programs create an enduring legacy, educating generations of students. With increasing number of scholars of Sikh studies, the field has expanded from religion and history to also include economics, conservation, and art. Continuing in our mission to create high-quality resources for the academic and artistic study of Sikhism, our latest publication, Sikh Arts from the Kapani Collection, co-published with the Smithsonian Institute, documents this unrivaled collection of art. As we look to the future, we think about new ways to maintain our connection with our past heritage so that our future generations can also be inspired, engaged, and educated all over the world.
The Sikh Foundation has, for 50 plus years, worked for the promotion and preservation of Sikh arts and heritage around the world. An important part of our material heritage is our buildings and monuments. And sadly, much of this is not even accessible to us today. And this is for multiple reasons, be it geopolitical, be it the destruction of the heritage, negligence, and most importantly, a lack of understanding and appreciation for it. The Sikh Foundation would like to change that because we recognize the importance of preserving our architectural heritage as well. We've partnered with UNESCO in the year 2000 to restore a building in the town of Shri Hargobindpur, which is not a Gurdwara, but a 16th century mosque built by our 6th Guru Hargobind for the Muslim inhabitants of the town. This is the example that our Gurus have set for us of tolerance and respect for all religions, and Sikhs down the generations have lived by it, including the legendary Maharaja Ranjit Singh. This time is special because today we are fortunate to have resources put together with passion and dedication by committed individuals, both Sikhs and Muslims all around the world. Mr. Iqbal Kaisar, a Pakistani national, is the pioneer who single-handedly documented the Gurdwaras in Pakistan, traveling to small villages and towns in search of this lost heritage. Researchers like Dr. Nadra Khan, Shahid Shabir, Jahandad Khan, Lovely Singh, and so many others are literally creating a revival of Sikh heritage in their home country of Pakistan. From the US, we have our own Dr. Dalveer Pannu, who has presented to us his detailed research on Sikh heritage sites in Pakistan through his monumental book. We also have Mr. Surjit Singh Hoti, who is working to bring communities together both in India and Pakistan. And from Singapore, we have Amardeep Singh, who has expanded the field to include multiple dimensions of this heritage. And he has effectively told a compelling human story of joy, sorrow, and compassion. His work has illuminated for us a past in which Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims lived and worked together to build the first indigenous empire in the Punjab, popularly called the Lahore Darbar under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Since the year 2014, Amardeep has completely dedicated himself to exploring and documenting for posterity the forgotten Sikh legacy remnants in challenging geographies. Author of 2 volumes, Lost Heritage and The Quest Continues, he also released 2 documentaries on YouTube, Peering Soul and Peering Warrior. he is now deeply immersed in his forthcoming film, Allegory, a Tapestry of Guru Nanak's Travels, which will be the first multi-episode documentary to chronicle the vast expanse of sites that were visited by Guru Nanak across 9 countries. With this, I welcome Amardeep Singh to the show. Sat Sri Akal, Amardeep.
Sat Sri Akal, Sonia, and thank you so much to the Sikh Foundation team, Tanmeet, who's there managing this behind the scenes, Rajendra, who's there. Thank you to all, and thank you to Dr. Kapani for creating this platform for all of us to come together. So,
thank you for joining us today, Amardeep, especially at this very late hour from Singapore. Amardeep, you have been continuously on the road for the past year before lockdown, filming your magnum opus in Iran, Iraq, India, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Tibet. So how does it feel to be staying in one place now for so many months?
Well, the quest never dies. The quest either is external or internal. This is a phase now for going inwards to bring together the vast repository of physical travel information on the footsteps of Guru Nanak. And really, we are working day and night. It's going to take us another 15 odd months. And we are on target by next year to put together the 30-episode documentary. But a task of this magnitude, that the journeys don't stop. It just moves from outwards into inwards. And we continue to move at a very rapid pace. So we haven't stopped.
We are very grateful that you have taken the time from your important work in editing the film to be with us today. So with this, let's get the show on the road, and it's over to you, Amardeep. And, and I ask my friends, while Amardeep is getting set up, if you haven't already shared this episode with your friends and network, I request you to please do so now by clicking the share button on your screens. Thank you. Amardeep, over to you.
All right. So thank you so much, Sonia. So for the audience, it is 1:13 a.m. in Singapore. And what I intend to do is, it's going to take us about just over an hour to take you through. I know I told Sonia that it's going to take me an hour, but Sonia, I must admit I've cheated. I've added a few more slides, right? So, so it's going to take us just over an hour to finish the entire journey. It's going to be a whirlwind tour. It's going to be a whirlwind tour because we're taking you through Pakistan. And it's not going to just be Pakistan, because when you're talking about Lahore Darbar, its expanse, while was Pakistan primarily, but it also went into regions which are a bit outside of the current political geography of Pakistan. So to understand the expansion of the military legacy of Lahore Darbar, we have to get into those areas. So I'm going to just make small detours from Pakistan in this presentation, and that's what is the extra work that extra slides that we've added on. So let's get started with this. Why this need for this quest that we have been on, as Sonia shared with you all for the last many years? I mean, from a very it's been my question in my mind from my age of 17 years when I was delving into the Sikh history, and my parents came from what became Pakistan in 1947. And the question that I would always ask myself is that my parents could not go back. They could not go back to their hometown. They could not even go to the gurdwaras which were there. And today's generation, if you ask them, if you had free access to Pakistan, where would you want to go? It never goes beyond just a few functional gurdwaras. In fact, most of the works that have happened in terms of documentation are also Gurdwara centric, right? And are primarily Punjab centric. So there's been a revival in the last 8 to 10 years because of the opening up of the internet. A lot of information is coming out. But I think we are on the right journey, but yet we are not at the point of arrival where we can say, you know, what was erased from our memories because of the partition that happened. And I'm talking from a Sikh legacy perspective, but the partition impacted all communities, Hindus, Muslims, Jains, it impacted all of them. But from a Sikh legacy perspective, the entire focus is only on Nankana Sahib, Panja Sahib, Kartarpur Sahib. And as the people are doing more and more works, it's expanding into more Gurdwaras in remoter locations, but it is Punjab and Gurdwara centric primarily. So this slide is a entry slide where we need to understand what was the need for this work. If you look at this, the question is that in 1799, when Ranjit Singh takes over the Lahore Darbar and thereby forms a formidable empire, which the British called it as a Sikh empire, but actually it was a Lahore Darbar. It was quite a secular empire wherein people from all faiths were working together, and also it had a lot of foreign generals working for it. It also had the Hindustani soldiers. That time Punjab and Hindustan were two different countries. It also had Gurkha soldiers. But 1849, when the British came inside Punjab, that was the last empire that they took over of what became the British India. But 98 years later, 1947, when they left, they divided the country into what became East and West Pakistan and India. What I've done is in the yellow in this slide, I've actually overlaid what was the Sikh Empire, which the British took over, the geography of that, and you've overlaid it over the map of India and Pakistan. And what comes out as a single statement from this is that close to 70 to 80% of that geography of the Lahore Darbar is today in Pakistan. Now, therefore, the question is that were our forefathers so incompetent that all that they made was Nankana Sahib, Panja Sahib, Kartarpur Sahib, and a few more functional Gurdwaras that have opened up now? And is it that my forefathers could not think anything beyond Gurdwaras? No, actually, there was a massive legacy that had churned art, architecture, military traditions, so and so forth. The intangible aspect of the Nanak Panthi communities, which I've had a lot of opportunity to actually delve into and study the intangible aspects of the people who are still staying there. There's so many aspects. And I say, if you have to understand our history, you have to have a footprint in Pakistan. So that's the reason why this work was done. This quest actually I embarked upon. Of course, a lot of Pakistanis have helped me. I mean, the list is endless, right? Even the establishment, the government, a lot of forces have come together. It's not possible for me to name all of them out here, but I thank everyone who has helped us. Let me move on to start with a profound 1.5 minute video, which really, because we're talking about the military legacy today, we're not talking about the Gurdwaras. I want to show this from a Lahore Darbar's perspective, just to make a point as to why this quest, and then we will start with the journey on the forts.
Lahore, once the capital of the Sikh Empire, is today devoid of the community that had churned its glorious chapters from this city. In 1798, Ranjit Singh rode to Lahore, climbed the walls of the fort and challenged Shah Zaman.
O grandson of Abdali, come down and measure swords with the grandson of Charat Singh.
Ranjit Singh created a mighty kingdom, which for the first time in 1000 years was ruled by the son of the soil. He halted the perennial invasions of the Indian subcontinent from the northwest. As I stood within the precincts of the Lahore fort, peering at the Athdhara, the 8-gated monument from where Ranjit Singh ruled the mighty kingdom, I was reminded of the painting from the past which depicts the hustle and bustle of the royal court. In that moment, the walls of the Lahore fort echoed a question from within the sounds of silence. Why is it that the glorious chapters that have churned in these lands are totally forgotten by the present generations of Pakistanis and the Sikh community? A few Sikhs who do visit these lands of their forefathers, their desires to explore the legacy footprints seldom surpasses the few functional Gurdwaras. Do they not have a responsibility to embrace us, the forgotten monuments of the Sikh kingdom? As I walked out of the Lahore fort, I sighed. I do not have an answer to this question of yours.
So just to summarize what Sonia has said, in terms of documentation, what has been done by us, by me and my team around me, are first the two books which are called Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan, which was published in end of 2015. And then the second book, which which followed about close to about 2 years thereafter, is called The Quest Continues, Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan. On this slide, on the left-hand side, you see both the books. Both are available on Amazon. What we have done inside this is that across 5 states of Pakistan, starting from Gilgit, starting from Baltistan, Kashmir, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab, Sindh, and Balochistan, we have mapped the remnants of Sikh legacy, not just the Gurdwaras. It goes far and beyond Gurdwaras to cover tangible, intangibles, communities of Nanak Panthis, the forts. Gurdwaras, of course, are a subset of it. And to me, the Gurdwaras are a subset of the broader study, art, architecture, and so on and so forth. Both the books are on Amazon. It's about 1,000+ pages of documentation that's happened. I can say at this point of time, these are the only 2 books that are giving a broad brush of the legacy remnants across multiple facets beyond Gurdwaras. On the right-hand side, you see the 2 documentaries which are available now on the YouTube. One is called Peering Soul and the other is Peering Warrior. Peering Soul is actually a journey across some of the remnants of the Gurdwaras in remote areas, and I've consciously not touched Nankana Sahib, Panja Sahib, Kartarpur Sahib and all, because that we already know. And the point here is through these remnants to convey a message, what have we forgotten from a spiritual legacy perspective. On the right-hand side is a subset of some of the forts that, I mean, there are a lot of forts that we will talk about now and which are covered in my books, but a small section of that in a 35-minute documentary is being shown in Peering Warrior. Both the documentaries are on the YouTube. You can go and have a look at that. So let's get down to the content of today's presentation, which is legendary forts. To understand the legendary forts, it's going to be a very rapid-paced visual presentation, but I need to spend a little bit of time on this slide to give you a bit of a historical context. And I've divided this in terms of a timeline into 5 boxes. And the point I'm trying to make is that from the Sikh Gurus period, the Sikhs were facing immense amount of challenge. The Sikh, as we define today, was not what was there at that time. I mean, it was a broader Nanak Panthi culture, right? But today we tend to default to the word Sikh. But yes, the community was under a lot of challenges. With the demise of Guru Gobind Singh Ji in 1709, Banda Bahadur comes into Punjab, and that's a period from 1709 to 1715 where there's a pushback that happens with the Banda Bahadur's forces. That's the first military pushback literally that happens, and in the process he comes from Nanded, he comes into Punjab at Samana, Sarhand, and he comes right up till Lahore. He takes charge of the territory, he issues coins, he brings about a lot of land reforms, and thereafter by 1716 he is executed, he's caught in, he's basically brought into Delhi, and his period is very short-lived. But he made a statement. He made a statement that a power can actually push back. If you look at the number of years of oppression that had happened, a power can have the ability to push back. Thereafter, a dark period comes in terms of our community's history, which is 1716 to 38. I call this phase as the annihilation, essentially being suppressed, and literally the Sikhs had vanished from the fields of Punjab because they were all living in jungles right now. And I'll not get down to details, but broadly you can read in the presentation as to what are the main touch points of oppression that happen. But literally the Sikhs are living in jungles. Then comes the third phase, 1739 to 49, wherein multiple foreign invasions start happening. Now the Mughal Empire is weakening and multiple foreign invasions happen, starting primarily with Nadir Shah's invasion from Persia, and thereby the Chota Kalukara in 1747, led by Yahya Khan. Ahmad Shah Abdali comes in 9 times, and there's a Vadda Kalukara, a Vadda massacre, a larger massacre in which 30,000 Sikhs are killed, and that time the numbers are very small. And 30,000 was literally a big number being wiped out in the attacks. The next phase, the fourth phase, is 1748 to 1799, where the power starts emerging in small pockets across Punjab in the form of 12 missiles. And the missiles primarily hold a certain geography. They would have differences between themselves, but under a common cause of the community, they would still get together in Amritsar once in a year. They would, in some ways, it was a great corporate structure. They would come into touch with each other. The leaders would get in touch with each other once towards the Diwali period in the Darbar Sahib, and they would, in some ways, report all that achievements that they've done and take directions and then vanish for the next 1 year, because it was literally a guerrilla warfare, right? But in this period, they started controlling certain territories. And from this emerges our story, what we're going to be talking about, the Lahore Darbar, because in 1799, Ranjit Singh takes charge of Lahore. And that's the video that I talked about in the earlier one, showing the Lahore Fort's wall, right? Moving forward, in the missile period, when the Sikhs, this is 1748 to 99, the forts that were formed at that point of time, primarily the forts are not remaining because they were being formed. These people were running a guerrilla warfare. They had started gaining control, but the forts that they were forming, they were all mud forts. Those structures have not survived. The next slide that I'm showing you is not a fort from that period, but it's just an example that I'm trying to show you. This is at Killa Mian Singh. I'm just trying to show that smaller forts did exist. And this is one of the small forts, but this is not from the missile period. This is from a later Ranjit Singh period, which is just showing you in a village. If you look at the thin bricks in this fort, from one of the bastion, it just shows that smaller forts were existing. And we will go through many more forts, large and small, but the period of the missile time, unfortunately, the forts are not surviving. So I'm only giving as an example here so that you can understand what smaller forts could have potentially looked like. Now, so this part, the smaller forts, we really have no visual documentation today to really show to anyone as to what they look like. So this is just a small example that I'm showing you what they could probably look like. But now the next slide, Ranjit Singh has not taken over Lahore. What does he face? He faces an internal challenge of 12 missiles who are literally warring amongst themselves because stability has not come in. The 12 Sikh missiles, as I said, they would come together once in a year, report their achievements, take directions, and again vanish in Punjab into their respective geographies. And if invasions would happen, they would come together and protect. And if in the invasions, the women or the wealth was being taken away from the Indian subcontinent, they would attack and they would release them. We know of all that history, but they had not really, they were yet warring amongst them. So that's the key point out here. So what I've shown in this map are the green areas, or the green names of various 12 missiles, which were controlling the geographies in Punjab, broadly. But what's important out here is, look at the external forces. I've shown you about 6 arrows in red, which are the external forces. And let's start from the westernmost side. For 800 years through the Khyber Pass, Punjab was being invaded by foreign invasions, what we call as the Turkis, right? This has got nothing to do with religion. Don't mix up religion with political forces. Because Lodhis were uprooted by Mughals, and Mughals were attacked by Nadir Shah, and so on and so forth. So it's got nothing to do with religion. The Turkis were coming in, the people from Central Asia, Afghanistan, coming in through Khyber Pass, and that danger, and that had been happening for 800 years. That danger continued to exist. If you see on the left-hand side, that arrow coming in from Khyber Pass, that's one. Mughal force had weakened. Smaller kingdoms were rising in the Indian subcontinent, and they were all wanting to expand. And that's the time Ranjit Singh has taken charge. From the northeast, you see the forces of Rajputs from the hill areas was coming towards Punjab in the territories of the Sikh missiles. The Gurkhas, who actually had areas in Himachal and even Dehradun under their control. So all that is India's map today, but Gurkhas from Nepal had control till there. And they were wanting to expand towards the lower hills and then enter Punjab. That's the other force that was coming in. If you go from southeast, the British had, the English, normally people think that English had taken over the whole of India by that time. No, they had come in from East India. The East India Company had expanded. There were pockets. And from the UP side, essentially they had come in from Calcutta, expanded into the Purbiya belt of Bihar, UP, and come into Delhi. And from there, now they were putting pressure towards Punjab. That's the other arrow. Marathas from southeast or from the south were coming also towards Punjab. And we know that Holkar actually did come in. And in the missiles period, actually, Marathas came into Punjab up till the Atak Fort. And I'll show you the picture of Atak Fort. They even hoisted the flag, the Maratha flag at the Atak Fort, but they quickly retreated because it was too far away from Maharashtra. And it was a very tumultuous period in Punjab, and they realized they could not actually manage it. So they retreated. And then there was this stray person, which is the last arrow from south, called George Thomas. He was a breakaway from the East India Company who had created his own empire, a small empire in Haryana at a place called Hansi. And he was also becoming ambitious as a mercenary to get into Punjab. Under this environment of all these red arrows, Ranjit Singh takes over Punjab. This is the Lahore Fort. Lahore Fort is not built by Sikhs. It has a long history, but from a structural perspective, what we know of is the main expansions and main building came into existence in Akbar's time in 1575. 1799, when Ranjit Singh takes it over from Shah Zaman, son of Shah Ahmad Shah Abdali, he adds many sections inside it. And what I want to show out here is the Athdara and the Musamman Burj. These are all the sections added from inside the Lahore Fort from a Sikh perspective. And on the right hand side, so as a principle in this entire presentation, all black and white pictures are not taken by me. Any colored picture is taken by my camera. So that's the principle, right? I have always, all my works are basically based on pictorial descriptions based on what I have done or the videos what I have done. So in this case, this black and white picture is an old picture from the time of Ranjit Singh's Darbar. He's sitting at that Adhara on the left-hand side, which is absolutely silent. And that's the question that I'm posing in that video that I showed you at the beginning, that the hustle and bustle is all vanished today. And I question that why is it that the present generation of the Sikhs, as well as the Pakistanis, who are basically Punjabis from the Punjab region, are absolutely ignorant about these chapters of history. That's what partition has caused, right? So right now, from a Sikh perspective, it's all Gurdwara centric. But here, what starts from an empire's perspective, Ranjit Singh was quite a leader in the sense that while, in this pictorial depiction out here, it's always shown that Ranjit Singh didn't really sit on a lavish throne. He was a common man's king, right? And he was quite a smart person. There's a book by this author called Rishi Singh, and if it's anyone interested, I would encourage you should read it, State Formation and the Establishment of Non-Muslim Hegemony. And hegemony, for those who may not understand, is basically leadership created by one social group over the others. And the reason why this piece was brought in is Sikhs were at that time less than 10%. And yet, after 800 years of invasions and the rules that were there, how did this small group form a governance? And that's the piece that this book that he's done is worth reading. It allows us to see through the lines to understand how the governance was established, right? But the point is, one of the aspects of that governance was inclusion of non-Punjabis into the forces, because on the other side, as we said, there were more than 7 red arrows coming towards Punjab, and he had to manage all that aspect. So he was like being sandwiched from all the sides. So at that time, you see on the slide the names of various European generals. Some were British, some were Italian, some were Napoleon's generals who came into Punjab. The bottom line I want to, and here are some remnants of those places, like Memorial of a Large Daughter, Abitabli's homes, plaque, which is there. His home is not there in Lahore anymore, but a memorial which the British had made, that is where Abitabli's home was. The point that I want to actually say out here is that at that time, Punjab was an expat's destination. Today, Punjabis go all over. We all go all over from the Indian subcontinent abroad for better career opportunities. Look at it at that time, what Ranjit Singh had created. Let's not get into this division of religions. A man of the soil had created an empire which was giving employment to people who were aspiring from the Western world to come and work for him. It was an expat's destination. Salaries were high, luxuries were high, and they had a tough job to do, but that's what they used to get paid for. At the same time, he had battalions, which actually the names tell us that it was an independent country, because he had Hindustani battalion, and Hindustani means the people from the Purbiya belt, primarily, the Bihar, Bengal, UP. He had a battalion like the British on the other side were recruiting, he had them up here. Plus, he did add a Gurkha battalion too. After Balbhadra Kuvar got defeated by the British in Dehradun, and I'll show you one of the slides where he died fighting in Punjab. So he was the leader of Dehradun, which was under the Gurkha Empire, and he came into Lahore Darbar, and that's why the generic term in the vocabulary of the Nepalis is, "Hey, tapai Lahori bhai ko ke? Hey, have you become a Lahori?" Because they still say, because in those days of Ranjit Singh's time, the farthest that a Nepali had ever been in terms of seeking a military appointment was to Lahore. And therefore, when the Lahore soldiers came back to Nepal, they had gone very far away. Today, Lahore, the Nepalese soldiers are all over the world, but in those days, Lahore was the farthest. And therefore, that general term came into the vocabulary saying, "Hey, tapai Lahori bhai ko ke? Have you become a Lahori? Have you gone so far away from India and from Nepal that you have taken employment in other people's army?" And that's the general term that they even use right now. Any soldier of Gurkhas who is working in, let's say, Singapore or Britain or America, they call them as Lahori even today. So let's move on. What happens, and after this I'm going to start just the visual depiction, because this background was important of the forts. After this we'll start. 1809, so Ranjit Singh takes over 1799. What I'm showing on this map is the following. If you see the green areas, he takes claim over these areas from Lahore. It's a large territory that he's taking claim over, because he says the missiles that are holding many of these areas are actually the Sikh. They should all come under one banner of the Sikhs, right? And we all are a community defending ourselves for a cause, and we should therefore be under one bondage out here. However, his actual expanse of control in these early days was literally the yellow area that you see, which is Amritsar, Lahore, the Majha belt. That's it. That's all he had under control. But he had started forming the alliances and the opportunities that he was looking at, and sometimes giving the threats to expand the empire. And he was taking claim over this entire green area. Because he staked claim and the British were coming from the east, the British checked him. And the checkmate is what drew that red line that you see on this slide, is along the river Indus, resulting in the Treaty of Amritsar in 1809, which basically he compromised with the British, because many of the Sikh missiles in what we have today as the East Punjab, what we call as Punjab from where Sikhs come, and I always say this, we should start using the right vocabulary. The Sikhs belong to the Indus region. They don't come from East Punjab. This whole belt of Indus region from Kashmir till Sindh, Balochistan, including Punjab on both the sides and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa right up till Afghanistan is what the Nanak Panthi territory was. But we tend to teach our children right now, Sikhs come from Punjab, and they'll show the map of East Punjab. Well, this East Punjab, the 90% of the territory at that time, is the one in 1809 they defected from an alliance under the Sikh leadership to come together as one force, and they went and joined the British. So in many ways, I sometimes think, are today's problems of our community an outcome of the mindset that we created in 1809, because the Sikhs are now, after partition, all in the East Punjab. And I look at this geography and I say, you know what? 90% of this geography belongs to that group of people who actually defected in 1809 and joined the British. And that resulted in that red line and checkered Ranjit Singh. This is known as the Treaty of Amritsar. And as I said, now Ranjit Singh starts expanding his claims. He starts taking action. From Lahore, I'm showing some expeditions that are taken, start happening towards Multan, towards Srinagar, towards Attock, towards Peshawar, up till Afghanistan border. And we'll break each of these and then get down into the forts, right? First one is Multan. And Multan, he starts as early as 1802. Basically, 1809, he's checkered. But 1802, he's already started going down south and having, Multan was under Muzaffar Khan, who was an Afghani. And he's already having battles with him. And those battles did not end till 1818. 1802 till 1818 is the period I've written here, the campaigns that are carried forward. And there are about 8 campaigns that are done against Muzaffar Khan. And finally in 1818, the Multan conquest happens in south, and that becomes a part of the Lahore Darbar. I mean, already the treaties are being signed. I know the revenue shares are happening, but you still cannot call it as a total acquisition because Muzaffar Khan was still existing as an independent entity. So what happens in the Multan and what is the fort there? I mean, unfortunately, the fort in Multan has not survived. In the Second Anglo-Sikh War, which was against the British, a lot of it got destroyed before, and thereafter a lot of it has finished. Today in Multan, you may find some small bricks here and there of the fort, but the fort does not survive. On the left-hand side is the famous Zamzama gun, which is lying in Multan, in Lahore, and close to the Lahore Museum area. And this is the gun which Ghulam Zilyani writes in his book about the Ranjit Singh's, and Ghulam Zilyani was a soldier of Ranjit Singh's army. The names tell you that this was a very secular army. Religions were not dividing people at that time, right? So Punjabis had come together under the name of Ranjit Singh. Ghulam Zilyani pens in his book saying that this, I don't know how true this is, but this is just an account from his book, saying that this gun, which was brought in number of days from Lahore just for the Multan campaign in 1818, actually fired many times and its wheel broke. And he says each time people would come and support the wheel with their shoulder, and when they would fire the gun, that person would die. I don't know how true this is, but he says he was the 117th one, and the Multan fort's wall got breached, and that breaching basically saved his life. Otherwise, he would have been the 117th one to put his shoulder, and he wouldn't have lived to write the account. What I want to show you here is a picture from present day Multan Museum. In Multan Museum, they've done a very good, the Pakistan government has done a very good job in terms of visually depicting the history of Multan, starting from Hinakish, Prahlad and Hinakish, because Prahlad was basically from Multan, and they go down the entire journey, coming up till the British time, right, up till the Anglo-Sikh Wars. And here's a photo from the Multan Museum, which they've displayed, in which they are showing Muzaffar Khan in battle with Hari Singh Nalwa in the Multan campaign. Now, what is interesting in this picture is that normally, pictures are shown with the one who has won the war to be on top. That's how it's always shown in art, right? For instance, in all the Anglo-Sikh wars, they will show the British having an upper position than the one who has lost the war. That's how the art is typically drawn, right? I'm not getting cynical about this. But when I looked at this, interestingly, what I found was, unlike the Sikh tradition, the Sikhs out here, Hari Singh Nalwa and all, are shown without turbans, and Muzaffar Khan is on top of them. But the reality was he lost the war, and I think in some ways not showing them with turban is to show them being defeated, right? But it's just an artist aspect that I'm trying to study from this. I may be wrong, but this is my perception. All right, let's move on. From Multan, which finally got captured in 1818, but parallelly, as I said, there were 8 expeditions that happened. Parallelly, there were expansions that started happening westwards. Now, 1813 to 1819, 2 major expansions happened. One was westward towards Attock. Attock was a part of Afghanistan at that time, just crossing the Indus River till it was conquered in 1813. It was a part of Afghanistan. Till 1819, when Ranjit Singh takes over Kashmir, it was a part of Afghanistan. Today, India and Pakistan have forgotten the gift that Ranjit Singh's Lahore Darbar has given to these 2 countries, that actually, if he wouldn't have expanded, and British, when they came in, they took over the whole empire, if he wouldn't have expanded, Attock, a certain significant portion of Pakistan, would be a part of Afghanistan today. Kashmir, which is today divided between India and Pakistan, both are claiming portions of Kashmir, actually would have been a part of Afghanistan, because they were ruling for over 100 years in that area. So 1813, he moves towards Attock, and at the same time in 1813, he gets into Kashmir to get Shah Shuja released and get the Kohinoor diamond released from the Afghans managing the jail with which Shah Shuja was imprisoned, who was the earlier ruler of Afghanistan, who had been overthrown, and he had come into Attock, and from Attock, Jahangir Khan actually caught hold of him, and he deposed him to Kashmir. And in Kashmir, he was kept in custody till his wife Wafa Begum came to Lahore and requested Ranjit Singh to get him released. In return, she would release the Kohinoor diamond. But we'll come to that story. But in 1813, he moves westwards towards Attock, which was Afghanistan that time. As he's going towards Attock, along the Jhelum River, in this slide that I'm showing, somewhere in between from Lahore to Attock, he takes charge of the Rohtas Fort. On the left is the picture of Rohtas Fort. Rohtas Fort was not built by the Sikhs. They had a role to play in it. They captured the fort. It was a massive fort which was built in the 1540s by Sher Shah Suri in Humayun's time, when he actually came inside. Thereafter, he commissioned this fort and it expanded. And Ranjit Singh took over this fort close to Jhelum. The second picture that I'm showing is basically a view from Choa Baba Guru Nanak Gurdwara on the first floor, looking into the Rohtas Fort. Basically, this Choa Baba Guru Nanak Gurdwara is associated with Guru Nanak's travel to Tilla Jokia. So this is through the broken remains of the Choa Baba Guru Nanak Gurdwara that we are seeing I'm trying to depict both spiritual and martial, the Miri Piri concept from this picture on the right hand side. This was taken over in 1813 while he's moving towards Attock. Now he reaches Attock. Attock was being managed was under Afghanistan at that point of time. This fort was built by Akbar. It's a massive fort. Today it's with the Pakistani army, and getting inside is very tough, very tough. I've had the opportunity to be inside it, and if you see Peering Warrior, you'll see the insides of this fort. And this is a picture that was taken from the other side of the Indus River of the Attock fort. That time it was Jahandar Khan who was managing this fort. By the way, just to clarify, we all heard Jahandar Khan at the same forum, the present day Jahandar Khan Jr., who talked about his Shergarh area and Haripur and Hari Singh Nalwa. This is not the same Jahandar Khan by lineage. This is a different Jahandar Khan from Afghanistan. So we are talking about Tanoli Jahandar Khan, who spoke on this. Don't mix the two, right? So this is a different Jahandar Khan, an Afghani origin. His brother was the ruler or was the governor of Kashmir. So the moment Ranjit Singh came to Attock, there was a battle that happened, but Jahandar Khan surrendered. And the fort came under the Lahore Darbar at that time in 1830. I've had an opportunity to go inside the fort and I've spotted a mandir and a gurdwara, both next to each other inside the fort. And this plaque on the right hand side that you see is from the gurdwara. In the video, I also show the mandir, but this is from the gurdwara. And I'm deviating a bit out here, but it's important to look at the intangible aspect, because what's written out here is Ek Onkar is Farashti Seva Karai Shrimati Manora Devi Supatni Lalaji Parjamal Anand Peshawar Wale. Right? Point I'm trying to say is that this entire belt of the Indus was a Nanak Panthi culture. Today we are very tightly boxed under the religious domains and boundaries, but the culture at that time was very fluid, and the religious beliefs and belief of Nanak was spread across the entire communities, right? And this shows, in today's context, you will say, oh, he's a Hindu, but you know what? They were all believers of Nanak. So this is 1813, the Attock fort, which is taken over. Now the storyline will break if I don't cover this, but I'm going to jump out of Pakistan and now get into Kashmir, because Attock campaign became the basis of Ranjit Singh now going into Kashmir. Because Jahandar Khan was the brother of the governor of Kashmir, so and Wafa Begum had promised the giving of Kohinoor if Shah Shuja, her husband, could be released, who was the king of Afghanistan, who had got captured and come into and had been kept in Kashmir now. So Ranjit Singh now leads an expedition in 1813 into Kashmir. Now, interestingly, between 1813 and 1819, Ranjit Singh and his army lead many campaigns into Kashmir. But his acquisition of Kashmir, apart from the revenue share arrangements or whatever it was, he kept receding back. In 1813, he wins over, he gets Shah Shuja released, he gets him to Lahore, he gets the Kohinoor into his custody, but it takes him up till further campaigns, and it's only in 1819 that he's able to overthrow the governor of Kashmir, who was basically Mahmud Shah Durrani's governor, who was actually managing the Afghanistan empire out of Kabul, right? So he throws him over, and 1819 is when the actual conquest of the Kashmir can be stated, that the treaty was signed and the 100% Kashmir came under Lahore Darbar. This is a picture of Hari Parbat. When you go to Hari Parbat in Srinagar, at the bottom of the hill of Hari Parbat, you'll find this plaque which is there, which is there, on which the history of the fort is written. And I've colored this section out there where it reads, later on, Sikh and Dogra period forces also used this fort. So therefore, this fort, which was built by the Afghans, actually was then had changed its hands. So this is the Kashmir part of it. At Attock, I want to bring, because we're talking about legendary forts, there is one small fort which was an outpost. Now the British records, and I've mentioned this in my book, the British records are mentioning about a Khairabad fort, which was on the other side of the river Indus. So Attock is along the river Indus. On the left-hand side, you're seeing a picture which I'm clicking. Standing inside the Attock fort, I'm clicking off one of the bastions of the Attock fort. And on the outside of the Attock fort's bastion is the Indus River. And then on the other side is the Khairabad fort ruins. Now, on the black and white picture, you're seeing a different view. Attock fort on your left-hand side, Khairabad fort is still existing. But in this left picture, when you go to Khairabad on the other side of the bank of the river, you'll find there's no fort now. And in my book, I've actually shown ruins and the remains and the foundations of that fort, which are still there, but the fort structure is finished right now. So you'll really need an eagle's eye to actually look for where the foundations are. So this is about the completion of the Attock fort. We're going to now move on. This is an interesting phase of the expansion, Hazara. And Jahandar Khan, in his previous lecture on the same forum, did talk about his family's relationships with Hari Singh Nalwa and the Hazara region. So I just want to actually bring this Hazara region onto the landscape, because once Attock was taken over, the forces now started moving towards the Afghanistan border, which today is the Afghanistan border, which is they'd already entered Afghanistan basically, but today's border, which is today's Durand line, Khyber Pass, is where they start moving towards Peshawar and beyond. But before that comes this region of Hazara on the northern side of Attock. Now, this is an interesting, so I'm showing you that slide, the circle where they actually start putting their focus, 1813 onwards, Hazara and Khyber. But let's look at Hazara. Hazara and Khyber together as a region, the Sikh history tells us there were 27 forts where Sikh history played a role. Many of the forts were constructed in this area in a short period of time. And when you construct a fort in a short period of time, they will generally be mud forts, or there'll be pickets, or there'll be smaller forts. And then some forts were taken over from the earlier dynasties. They were made by earlier dynasties. But on the right-hand side, I've given you the names of all the 27 forts that existed in the Hazara and the Khyber region. 27 forts. And today, if you want to trace the 27 forts, you will find barely a few names are existing, or barely a few of these forts are existing. Most are vanished from the landscape, either are submerged under the Indus River, and we'll talk about some of them. But by and large, I would say 60 to 70% of these forts are no more to be found in this region. They're all finished. But the history books do talk about it. So in this region, we come to Haripur. Haripur, the city is named after Hari Singh Nalwa. This is the wall. Haripur fort was later expanded by the British, but this wall is the older brick wall, the stone wall, and this probably is one of the remains from the Sikh era period. But most of the fort is got different brick structures, which are actually additions from the British era. On the right-hand side is a picture from what Hari Singh Nalwa created in this region was the Rangila Canal. From the Dor River, he brought in water, and that water was distributed inside this entire Hazara region. And in fact, today's Malta and the orange farmings that happen, this region has a lot of those fruits growing in this region. And a lot of people say that it's thanks to Hari Singh Nalwa's vision that he brought in water and distributed it through the canal system, through the Rangila canal system. This canal system on the right hand side was called as Rangila Canal. That this region became a crop generator for the Lahore Darbar. We're going to move on in the Hazara region itself. From Haripur, we move upwards north, and this is where what Jahandad Khan in the earlier session was speaking in a few weeks back. This is the fort which was built by Hari Singh Nalwa in Shergarh. Today, it's under the Jahandad Khan's family stays here. But if you look at the lower sections and on the left picture, there are embrasures inside this fort, which is basically to keep the guns from inside. It has a fort structure till the lower section. But of course, now that a family is living inside it, they've constructed walls on top of it, and now they've got a roof on top of it. So it now looks like a home, but the lower walls still give you an indication that it was basically a fort, right? And on the right-hand side, so this is from inside the fort and in the residential area, which Jahandad's family has constructed. From there, we're actually looking at this small mountain on the right-hand side, and I've written a picket out there. There are remains of another small fort which is on top of this hill, which was basically made to look, and a small group of soldiers would be based out there to look into this Shergarh fort from a security perspective. This is not a fort, but from a military aspect, since I talked about Balbhadra Kuwar, who was the Gurkha regiment leader for Ranjit Singh's army, this is at Pir Sabak along the Kabul River. What you see on the right-hand side in this picture is basically the Gurdwara, which was made in the memory of Akali Phula Singh. And on the left-hand side, that structure that you're seeing outside is basically a memorial built in memory of Akali Phula Singh, who died at this place in the Battle of Naushera at Pir Sabak, next to the banks of the Kabul River, which you can see in the Peering Warrior. I've shown this in a very expansive manner, but this is the memorial that was built. It's not a fort, but the reason I'm showing this is sometimes I wonder how we have been very short-sighted in documenting our history. I'm talking about my forefathers, because Ranjit Singh's Darbar, Lahore Darbar, did not discriminate people by religion. As I said earlier, people of different faith, different region had come together. There are two brave generals who died fighting the Battle of Naushera out here, Akali Phula Singh and Balbhadra Kuwar, who was the head of the Golkha battalion. Both were equally great generals, and both died fighting for saving the Lahore Darbar. But we made a memorial for Akali Phula Singh, with all due respect, but chose to ignore Balbhadra Kuwar because he was not a Sikh. Sometimes these actions make you think that your forefathers erred, because how broad and embracing, how inclusive a story it was, but we have narrowed it down to just a faith. But this, if Balbhadra Kuwar's memorial was next to Akali Phula Singh's memorial, we would have had a very different narrative. Now you need to read the books to take this out, right? Okay, moving on. In the same region of Hazara, there's another fort, which is Shab Qadar Fort. I will invite you to look at the Peering Warrior documentary, but there is a pretty hilarious narration inside the Shab Qadar Fort. Shab Qadar Fort was built in 1837 on a mount which was called as Sikho Teri. There was Teri is basically a mount. The word Sikho was because there was a Hindu Sikh population around that mount, and this fort was built on top of that mount. But it was built in 1837. Ventura, who was one of his European generals, Ranjit Singh's general, and he was a very close general of his, he was visiting Shab Qadar. He was, commanding Shab Qadar, and Sher Singh, Ranjit Singh's son, was visiting this fort when a group of Afghan soldiers and a battalion attacked this fort in the night, knowing that the son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, Sher Singh, is inside the fort today. So they attacked. And when they attacked, actually they got inside the fort. And there was a battle that happened, but yes, these people from inside pushed the Afghans out, and they were actually pushed out of the fort, and finally they were basically taken away. They were pushed out of Shapkadar basically. Now, next day was a big source of embarrassment for Ventura as well as Sher Singh, that while Sher Singh was there, the enemy soldiers could attack, and they could get inside the fort. That means the guards were not on their toes at that point of time. It was a source of embarrassment. So a court martial was called, but Sher Singh did not have the backbone to pass any judgment against Ventura, because Ventura was a very solid commander of Ranjit Singh. So what the judgment was, a hilarious one. The judgment was that, you know, it was not the fault of the soldiers. It was not the fault of the commander, which is Ventura. It was the fault of the gates of this fort, which were too weak to hold back the invasion of the Afghan army, and they broke. So basically, 100-year sentence was passed to these gates, and that they will be chained to the central pillar. And these gates are lying chained inside this fort still. And if you see on the right-hand side, the 100 years actually finished off in 1940. Now, in 1940, in the British time, the gates should have been released. They were not. And then 1947 partition happened. Now they are not going to get released. And I did jokingly say to the Pakistan the commander of this place, I said that, you know, you must release them. But I think it's good if they don't release it, because although they've served their sentence of 100 years, I think it's good if they don't release it, because it could tomorrow, once Pakistan opens these circuits, if they open it, if they have the vision to open and capitalize on these circuits for tourism, which I think is a multi-million dollar industry, but they need to actually allow this to happen. Right now, I don't see that happening in the near future, but if they do allow, the chaining of these gates will be a hilarious story for people to come and watch. Moving on, Mansehra, again in Hazara region, while going to Shergarh, is a small town, a region from where a lot of people from our family came, because we came from Muzaffarabad in Kashmir, Hazara region, Mansehra, and so on and so forth. My cousins come from this region. In Mansehra, the current police station is basically a fort inside which there's a police station. And this fort, though looks to be modern, but if you actually if you peel away a little bit of plaster from this fort, you'll find the old structure is still there, which gives way that this is a pretty old fort, right? And this was built by Maha Singh, who was the governor of Hazara region after Hari Singh's death in 1837. So he built this fort in Mansehra. On the way along Jhelum, I'm now going to go down, I'm ending this Hazara region and move towards Peshawar after this. But I want to just make a small mention. There was another place of control that was established in this region, was close to Jhelum, which is a place called Katas Raj, where Hari Singh Nalwa actually had a small fort constructed. What you see in the front of that, so this is a bastion you're seeing, is a small residential kind of a fort. It is written in the books, in the old books, that there was an administrative office in front of it, which on the right-hand side picture you're seeing is an administrative office. Also, it is believed that it was a Gurdwara also. But unfortunately, this place had been lying abandoned for years. Unfortunately, when L.K. Advani, way back in 1990s, expressed a desire to visit Pakistan, and he said he wants to also visit Katas Raj. Katas Raj has Buddhist era monuments, Hindu monuments, plus the Sikh era monuments. But when he expressed the desire to come to Pakistan and visit Katas Raj, a flurry of activity was done to restore a few places in a short period of time, and some name cards were put up. Unfortunately, outside this administrative building, which oblique some say is a Gurdwara also, a plaque was put, which today even exists, calling it as Ramchandra temple. This is not a structure of a temple, but I think it's gone because Sikhs have been ignorant about their history of this region. But if you look at, I've given the Government of India notification number 11681 dated 12th April 1921 by the British government, which is classifying this as the administrative office of Hari Singh Nalwa. But today the government of Pakistan has put a plaque out there which is saying Ramchandra temple. And now I think once you branded it something, it's pretty much gone. So I don't think it's a cause worth even now looking for. That now has been branded as a temple now. So now moving on, before we end this Hazara region, I want to actually, I did make a statement earlier that a lot of these forts have finished off from the map, right, from the geography. I said there are 27 forts that existed in this region. You can't find most of them. 70% are finished. Yet in some books, you find the mention of these forts. There is a book by DJF Newall called The Highlands of India. And in the Highlands of India, he stands at Darbar looking into the river Indus and beyond, from where the invaders would come and cross the river Indus and go on one route to Kashmir. He's standing there after the Anglo-Sikh War, Second Anglo-Sikh War. The Punjab is now a part of British, and DJF Newall walks around. He walks a large territory of India, but when he goes through Punjab, he actually sketches a picture which is on top, and in which I've actually circled the areas where he mentions about some Sikh era forts which were in this region. Today, you don't see them. For me, the question was, till 1947, Sikhs were living out here. This picture was in 1880s or so, the book got published, right? And his journey was in 1850s. So why is it that my community did not find it important enough to actually go and look for these places, document them, that it only a Britisher has done it, and after that there is no other visual documentation? So I took it upon us, and I thank Jahandar Khan, who was with me. We went to Darban, we went and searched for this place. We stood on top of that region and we clicked the picture of the river Indus, trying to map it as close to DJF Newall's writings of about more than 120, 130 years back. And we looked at this. Unfortunately, the entire Indus basin is silted. It's got a lot of sand which has come up because ahead on the left-hand side, when the river flows, there is a Tarbela dam which has been made, which is a very big dam. And because of dam being built, a lot of water has a lot of sand has silted in this region. And you cannot get that same perspective because now you have to stand at an altitude. I think DJF Newall sketched that by standing at the base of the Indus River. That's why the mountains look a bit bigger, but we could not stand at the bottom. So we stood at the flat land on top and sketched this. The only reason I've done this is, and in my book, actually, I've tried to copy and mark the forts which did exist in this region. You don't have these forts. Now we're going to quickly move on from Hazara and move towards what today is the Durand line, which is Afghanistan. Today, we are already in the Afghanistan territory, which has been taken over, which is in the Lahore Darbar time. But now we are moving by today's definition of what Afghanistan is, the Durand line beyond Khyber Pass. So, after having consolidated the Hazara region, in 1834, finally Peshawar is taken. But Peshawar is not taken over in one expedition. There are expeditions that happen between 1818 and 1834. Multiple expeditions happen. And finally, also there is some revenue share arrangements happen. I call revenue share arrangements not as a total control because it's a compromise control. You have got your footing there, but you've not staked it fully. And that staking of fully of the territory of Peshawar happens in 1834. And when that happens, Bala Hisar fort, which was predating the Mughal era. A lot of construction was done in the Mughal era. But because Peshawar is on the invasion route and the Iranian invasion, the Afghani invasions, Ahmad Shah Abdali, Nadir Shah, multiple invasions were happening, this fort was a heap of dump, basically, as the Britishers called it. And I've given the references in my documentary, Peering Warrior, that this was a heap of garbage and dump at that time when Hari Singh Nalwa came into Peshawar and Ranjit Singh took over this place. Inside the fort, you will find, and I've shown this in my books also, you'll find certain segments where Sikh era construction has happened. The typical Sikh era style of the palanquin style or the arches from a Sikh era perspective, the architecture style is basically there inside this fort, basically which indicates that the fort was reconstructed, restored in certain areas, certain newer sections were added. Yet today, even today, when you enter the Bala Hisar fort, the Sikhs called it and rebranded it as Sumergarh. There's a plaque inside it, and the plaque, this plaque on the right hand side is right at the entrance of the Bala Hisar fort, which says the Sikh inscription, and it reads down the whole thing. It says victory to Akal Purakh with the grace of Shri Akal, and it talks about when this fort was taken over. But in the end, on the last line, this plaque was put up in the time of British. They have written it as Samirgarh. The history books don't call it as Samirgarh. The history books call it as Sumergarh, because Sumer is a word which represents from a spiritual perspective, from the Indic philosophy perspective. Meru is a representation of a pinnacle of a spiritual elevation, and Sumeru is the highest of the pinnacle of the spiritual achievement. Meru is akin to a mountain. Some call Meru or Sumeru as Kailash Parbat, but this is what was brought inside from that spiritual perspective. It was called as Sumergarh, but unfortunately, and history books talk about that, but unfortunately the plaque I found interestingly was, it says Samirgarh. Maybe this, I don't know, maybe this plaque was later on after the British period got destroyed and maybe it was rewritten. I don't know, but this plaque is still there inside. Okay, from Peshawar now Hari Singh Nalwa moves towards the Khyber Pass. Jamrod, where he dies. This is the Jamrod fort. On the right hand side is a drone shot. I'll move my I don't know if you can see it, but I'm moving my cursor on the screen. On the outside, you see this white structure of this. I'm looking at the right picture. I'm looking at the right picture, and my cursor is going around and around on that left side of the right picture. That's the section which is a white structure on the outer periphery of Jamrod Fort, where Hari Singh Nalwa's body was cremated. On the left picture is the ground view of the Hari Singh of the Jamrod Fort. Right hand side is the drone view of the Jamrod Fort. I was there in 2014 for the first book, and then at that time we were not able to go inside, and Shahid was with me at that time, Shahid Shabir, and the local Sikh population refused to take us to Jamrod, and we both went on an excursion, and we reached the Jamrod Fort, but we couldn't go inside because it is with the army. But in 2016, my quest and my desire was still alive, and I was yearning to get inside it. I finally entered inside the Jamrod Fort, and my desire was to stand on the bastion of the Jamrod Fort, on one of those bastions, and look towards the Khyber Pass. And that's the picture I want to show you, because Jamrod Fort's history is that it was built in 54 days. Once in 1836, Hari Singh Nalwa came there, and he died in the next year in a battle here with the Afghans. But when this fort was built, thereafter in the history of the subcontinent, which today is divided between India and Pakistan, actually no invasions have happened from the west, Khyber Pass, into the subcontinent. Yes, today it's Pakistan, today it's India. But you know what? After 1836, the only invasion that happened into this region of Indus was from the east, where the British came inside. And sometimes, sometimes they say in the mutiny of 1857, I'm deviating a bit, digressing a bit out here. They say the Punjabis sided on the British. It's a narrative which is not projected in the right way, because actually it's the Purbiya soldiers which helped British over 120, 130 years of expanding into India and coming into the Punjab and basically taking over Punjab. And the first war of independence was not 1857. I say the first war of independence was the two Anglo-Sikh wars, where if the Purbiya soldiers would have been with the Punjabi soldiers, British would have been ousted from the Indian subcontinent. But history is history, right? So it didn't happen. Moving on, this is the view that I was dying for. And as I stood on top of the bastion of the Jamrod Fort and looked at the Khyber Pass from the Jamrod Fort, this is a picture that I was yearning for, that this is the pass through which all the 800 years of invasions had been happening. Now, having said that, I'm going to quickly come down. You know what? So this chart is something that I've drawn from my understanding of the Sikh history. Often I say is that, and this is years of history, I've been studying history and spirituality and other aspects from 17 years of age, but no book has given me this aspect. But once you've walked the lands and once you've seen it for yourself, the strategy starts kind of getting understood. Now, I don't know whether Ranjit Singh or Hari Singh Nalwa had this strategy, but I see a method in the madness. And the method in the madness is the following in this slide that I'm trying to say. When we look at those 27 Sikh era forts along the Indus region, in the Hazara region, Attock, and going right up till the Durand line, Afghanistan border that it is today, through the Khyber Pass, I draw them into two circles. I call them as two rings of defense. The first ring of defense was the first list, this circle on the left-hand side, where Michni Fort, Shapkadar, Jamrod, Burj-e-Hari Singh, Bara Fort, Peshawar, Bala Hisar, all these forts come in. They are right at the gateway of invasion, which is the Khyber Pass. They plugged the Khyber Pass, these forts. Now, for 800 years, people would come from Khyber Pass, come to Peshawar, halt there, and then there would be two routes. The lower route would take them to Attock, which was a part of Afghanistan that time. They would cross the Indus, go into Attock, and then from there get into Lahore, and then go deep inside the Indian subcontinent. Now, all invasions, Nadir Shah, Ahmad Shah Abdali, all of them happened through this route. The second route was from Peshawar upwards north. The route would go to Darbar. Darbar is the place where I stood and took that DJ. I mapped that DJF Newall's picture in my second book. They would go to Darbar, pay the boatmen to make their armies cross the Indus River. They would, from Darbar, then head towards Kashmir, because Kashmir was a part of Afghanistan. To control Kashmir, the Afghanis would come from there, and this Darbar route they would take. This is the second line of defense, the second circle on the right-hand side, where many forts like Akora, Jahangira Fort, which are not existing, Khairabad, I told you, stop, it doesn't exist. It's on the other side of Attock Fort. Attock Fort is existing, and there are many other forts like Tarbela, Sirikot, Gandhgarh, all have gone submerged inside the Indus. And Mansehra Fort, I told you, Shergarh Fort, I told you. All these forts were the second line of defense, which basically blocked the two invasion routes, one into Lahore and the other into Kashmir. Bringing this segment of the first ring of defense, further strengthening it with a few more pictures of the forts. From Peshawar, when you move towards Khyber Pass, towards Jamrod Fort, you find that there's a place where yet remains of a monument is existing, which the locals call it as Burj-e-Hari Singh. Now, this Burj-e-Hari Singh, this is one of the bastions. It's been plastered. You see that protrusion on the right-hand side. Actually, a person has made it his home. And this is, on the right-hand side, is the picture of that man's home, which is on the right-hand side. A bastion is typically a circular, cylindrical thing, but he's added his home on the side. So he's made the bastion his home on the side. This is the one bastion of the 4-bastion fort, which was there. Of that, only one bastion is remaining. We went and searched for the ruins of the other 3 bastions, but they are not remaining. Even the foundations we couldn't find. So this is the only bastion that's remaining. That's the picture of the person who's staying inside. He allowed us to go inside, but he's occupied it. Along this region, I'm showing you on the left-hand side, the Bara Fort. I have been inside the Bara Fort, but this is the only one existing fort where I was not able to take a picture from inside, because the day we went inside, the commander was not there, and the other people would not allow us to take the picture, although we had the permission, but we could not. So I've just taken one outside picture of Bara Fort. It's a mud fort. On the right-hand side, therefore, I'm strengthening it by showing a British era picture of the Bara Fort, right? Moving on, from Burj-e-Hari Singh, Jamrod, and now you move towards the Torkham, which is the Afghanistan border. This is the last post. In the Sikh history, the Michni post is talked about. Michni post was post means a small area, a small picket. And on the mountain that you see on the left-hand side is the Michni post. There is no remains of the Sikh era monument out here, right? In fact, some of the people who have written something about Michni have classified it at a different place altogether. But Michni is this area actually. From here, when you are standing on top of the Michni, there's an army outpost out there, and we were inside it, and we were looking towards Afghanistan. On the right-hand picture, I'm showing you, I'm standing at Michni. I'm looking at the small hill in front of me, which is the Ali Masjid Fort. Ali Masjid Fort, and thereafter, on the right-hand side, you see in the picture is Afghanistan border. So this is the last picket through which the Hari Singh Nalwa's forces were now looking. They had pushed beyond the Khyber Pass and they were looking at the plains of Afghanistan. Ali Masjid Fort does find a mention that the tribals living in Ali Masjid, Jamrod had water problems. And there was an arrangement that was made that water would be ferried from as far as Ali Masjid into Jamrod. Inside Jamrod Fort, there's a well, and you look at that well and you throw something inside it. It takes many seconds for the echo to come back, which just shows the water level is so deep inside. And there is a revenue share arrangement that was there between Hari Singh Nalwa and the tribals of the Ali Masjid area to bring water into the Jamrod Fort. This finds a mention in the history. Okay, now I'm coming to the last section and bringing it to an end. I know I'm slightly up, but I just, as I said, I've added a few slides. I'm hoping people would not mind because this is a valuable information that I'm sharing. And now I'm going to go slightly in Pakistan and then outside of Pakistan towards the end of the empire, the expeditions that happened, and bring this presentation to a close. Now the northward expansions start happening. Lahore Darbar, after having taken over Kashmir, in 1834, Kashmir was taken over in 1819. 1834, the Lahore Darbar takes over Ladakh. I say this to the people in India many times that you've forgotten what the gift of Lahore Darbar and the Ranjit Singh was, or the Punjabis or the Sikh Empire was to India. Ladakh was always known as Chota Tibet. It was a part of Tibet, which today would have been a part of China, had it not been Ranjit Singh who brought it into the map of Lahore Darbar, and when British came in, it became a part of the British India. But he did that conquest in 1834. Zorawar Singh led that expedition. I must say this out here. I'm going to bring in Zorawar Singh's name into these expeditions. I find it hilarious and ridiculous when people, both Sikhs and the Dogras, are fighting a worthless discussion on the internet. Zorawar Singh was a Sikh or a Hindu. How does it matter? I was working with American Express for 25 years. My loyalty was with the company. How does my religion or faith matter out here? Lahore Darbar had people of all faiths, Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs. They were employees of Lahore Darbar. They were not acting as people of faith. Today, our entire history is being only boxed into faiths because people can only, people can only aspire to do things under a banner of faith. No, it was not like that. Zorawar Singh's religion is of no consequence out here, because when I talk about the Tibet campaign, keep in mind, 3 battalions went. Ghulam Rasul Beg, Basti Ram, Zorawar Singh. History has chosen to forget the contribution of Ghulam Rasul Beg. Is he a Muslim? That's why we've forgotten it. And we only are massaging the ego of Zorawar Singh because it's a Dogra versus Sikh or a Hindu versus Sikh thing. Don't get into these discussions. They are worthless. He was an employee of the Lahore Darbar, but his contributions for the Lahore Darbar in the northward campaigns were significant. In 1834, Ladakh campaign. This is the Zorawar Fort in Ladakh, this is a black and white picture which I have clicked. I mean, I had already processed it in black and white. So this is one of the exception of the black and whites, which actually is clicked by me. It's not from the internet or anywhere. So as a principle, I said all black and white pictures are from the internet, but this was clicked by me. I just gave it a dramatic kind of feel when this is about 10 years back, I clicked it. This is Zorawar Fort in Ladakh. This was captured in, Ladakh was captured in 1834. 1840, Baltistan. So Ladakh is in India right now. Baltistan, which is in Pakistan right now. The area of Skardu, from where the river Indus flows. In my second book, there's a beautiful picture of the river Indus, which I clicked while standing on top of that hill, which is the Skardu Kharpocho Fort, and I clicked it downwards. It's a beautiful picture of the river Indus, and this fort is next to the river Indus, which is at quite a height. But you know what? The madness, I mean, I was not well at that time when we had to actually go up, but the passion was very high, and we climbed this. I remember this person, his name is Muslim Bhutto. He met me in Skardu, and he and I trekked up, and we reached in about half an hour, and we clicked those pictures from there. This is on the right hand side is the inside of the Kharpocho Fort picture. Kharpocho Fort was with Ahmad Shah, and Zorawar Singh with his battalion from Ladakh came into Baltistan, Skardu in 1840. This fort, it's written in history, was won without a battle. Ahmad Shah basically just walked away, right? It's interesting. I was able to go into the municipal commissioner's office in Skardu and look at the registers. There are Sikh registrars' names from pre-partition which are written out there, the commissioners' names and so on and so forth. And in Persian script, Khalsa Sarkar is still written. And I've shown on top out there a picture from that land records files where the titleship of some of the lands in the city area actually were all transferred to the Khalsa Sarkar, which is Lahore Darbar. And this is where I say, when people fight, what was the faith of Zorawar Singh? Zorawar Singh was loyal to the Khalsa Sarkar, which is basically Lahore Darbar. I was loyal to American Express. It doesn't matter who I was, a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu or a Sikh. So I think we need to broaden our vision, give the right narratives. Don't box yourself down into religions, because already the world has been fragmented and we are fighting over petty things, right? With that, I'm going to bring this to an end with the last slide, which is basically, this was 1840. Ranjit Singh dies in 1839. This expansion, actually, Baltistan happens after Ranjit Singh's death. Ladakh is captured Ladakh is annexed before his death in 1834. But 1840 is the last conquest of the Lahore Darbar. Ranjit Singh dies in 1839, and the Lahore Darbar, British are basically waiting for his death, and the leadership was not able to take charge. I am not going to get into that aspect of the history, basically how the empire crumbled, basically. But all I would say in this slide is a picture that I clicked in one of my travels. This is clicked by me, of the sun setting behind the magnificent mountains, depicting that the sunset happened finally in 1849 with the end of the empire. So as I said, I would take about slightly more than 1 hour, but from the time I started, we have taken about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Apologies for that, but I just thought I'll give you more information. I'm just going to park the last slide on basically the 2 books and the 2 documentaries. The books are there on the Amazon. There are 1,000 pages of documentations that have happened. On the right hand side of the 2 documentaries, you can see them on the YouTube. With that, I end my presentation. Sonia, you can take charge. Just guide me what I need to do. Do I need to transfer this back to you all?
No, Amardeep, for now it's fine.
Okay.
I think later you can transfer it to Tanmeet. But thank you very much. This was a phenomenal presentation, and I'm sure everyone felt it was worth every minute. And I think you've given us such a wonderful insight into the evolution of the Sikh community as well as the broader Punjabi community through 3 centuries, starting from 17th, 18th, and culminating in the 19th century creation of the Lahore Darbar and its critical military assets. And the fact that you have seen these places firsthand makes it all the more special. And as you were showing those images and of those glorious forts, which are from a bygone era, the verses of Bhai Veer Singh from his poem, Samay, rang through my mind. And I'd like to share 4 lines, which is, Ho aje sambal is samay nu, kar safal udanda javda. E thairan jaach na jaanda, lang gaya na mud ke aanda. Ho aje sambal is samay nu. So let's make the most of the time that we still have to save this heritage for our generations to come. So Amardeep, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure for giving this opportunity. Yeah, you know, I'm passionate. As you would know, my intention was to share as much as I can. What you got today in 1 hour, 15 minutes is literally what will take you in about 400 to 500 pages to read in a very complicated history to put the timelines and other things. I've tried to simplify it in 1 hour, 15 minutes. So I hope people will take away something from this. Yeah, thank you so much.
I hope people will be inspired to really go for the books, the 2 books that you have so laboriously written, because I personally guarantee you that these are 2 volumes that you want to have in your own personal libraries. And I myself keep finding myself going back to them over and over again. So I encourage all of you to get your copies. They are available at Amazon, I believe. On any other place that if there are
Yeah, Sonia, I mean, if Amazon sometimes has, you know, this stocks in, stocks out, the other place is lostheritagebook.com, which is also given as address out here. Just write lostheritagebook.com and you can also order from the shop tab out there.
That's wonderful.
But I do encourage people, go after this session to the YouTube, write down Amardeep Singh, write down Peering Soul as one documentary and see that, write down Amardeep Singh, write down Peering Warrior, and in YouTube see the second documentary. There's a lot which has been put there, so you will get a feel of what is there. And I'll share with you that these documentaries, like my 2 books, were not supposed to. My books were not supposed to be written. It's because 30 years of my own grappling, and when I went in and the way the energies started opening up things for me, I felt compelled that I must write it. Otherwise, why is the energy showing this to us? Because if we don't write it, we can't build layers and foundation. Books and documentations are the first foundation on which the intangibles start building up. And therefore, I did that. The documentaries, I can tell you up front, they were not intended to be. It's a different story. When I went inside, this data just fell on my lap. We were not making a documentary. We were not going in to make a documentary. It happened by chance and the data fell in. And after 2 years of sitting on this data, which came to us by chance, we tried to reverse engineer it and put it together so that the information does not get lost and can be carried forward to the next generation. Free of cost, it's been put on YouTube. What we are doing right now, as Sonia said, is for a 15-month period, me and my wife, along with the videographer team, have traveled across 9 countries on a massive project called ALLEGORY, a Tapestry of Guru Nanak's Travels. And we have finished the filming across 9 countries. And we are right now in the post-production phase, cleaning down the narrative, doing the artwork, solicitation, music, and other things. But from September, we start stitching the documentaries together. And I'll be very honest, I will get into a very inward phase from September, and I probably take very few lectures to talk. I'll be very selective because I know I've got 12 months of a massive endeavor with our project team to put these 30 episodes together, hopefully to release it by end of next year. That to me is the life's mission right now. So I'm going to be very selective on where I'm going to speak, how much I'm going to speak, because it's going to be all a focus on the narrative building.
So I'm glad we got you now when we did. And we wish you good luck with your project. The Sikh Foundation is a strong supporter of your project.
Thank you.
And I encourage everyone else to also come up with their support. And I think we have we can spend a few minutes over some of the questions. One of the question is from Amardeep Singh, and he's asking, was Balbhadra Kanwar son of Amar Singh Thapa?
No. As far as my knowledge goes, I will not be very affirmative on this. As far as my knowledge goes, no, he was not. Balbhadra Kanwar was a Gurkha general or head of the Dehradun region. No, he was not of Amar Thapa, no.
Okay, so that answers it. And another one is from Soumya Guntur. And she has asked, how many Sikhs are there in Pakistan today?
Oh, you know what? Now we are going outside of the martial subject and getting into. Do you want me to answer that? Because that's going outside of the legendary forts. But we are getting. I do talk about this in many of my topic other sessions. Should I take that, Sonia? You want me to?
So, Amardeep, an interesting thing today has been that in our session, we've had a very broad audience. Okay. And from different religious backgrounds, which is fabulous and which is wonderful. And I think the question could be relevant.
Okay, I'll answer.
We're talking about history.
I'll answer. You know, I'm a bit of a slippery fish. So my question will be answered with a question.
That's true.
Okay? I would ask whoever, Soumya Guntur, who's asked this question, thank you for asking that. It's a question which is very close to my heart. And normally when I'm talking about other aspects of my research, I do bring up this question, bring up this subject. But the question that I pose to the audience always is, can you help me define who is a Sikh first? Right? Because if you have to answer that question, first you need to understand what are you trying to define? Because what partition has done, because, you know, first and foremost, cultures in the past would live along and thrive along the river belts. There's a Gangetic culture, there is an Indus culture, which comprises of the Indus River and the 5 rivers of Punjab, and that runs from Kashmir, Baltistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab, Sindh and Balochistan. Now, today's definition of Sikhs would be, your mind would gravitate towards me as I look from a male perspective. And if that's the question that you're asking, then the answer is very simple. There are about 11 to 13,000 Sikhs. Majority of them are all Pashtun Sikhs. Punjab was cleansed on both the sides of Muslims were cleansed on East Punjab. Hindu Sikhs were cleansed on this side. It basically, everything finished off. And Sikhs visibly finished off. However, in the northwest frontier area in 1947, Peshawar, beyond Peshawar, not even Peshawar, in the remote areas towards Afghanistan border, in the tribal areas, Sikh farmers survived. My estimate is about 2,000 such people would have survived in 1947. Those have multiplied to about 11 to 13,000 today, as you see me, right? And they are now all over in Punjab because economic reasons, religious reasons, other reasons, and also the Taliban problem in those regions in the northwest frontier has resulted in the migration. And today the entire Nankana Sahib is filled with Sikhs, but none of them are Punjabi Sikhs. They're all Pashtun Sikhs coming from that tribal belt area. They're their descendants. Now, this is an easy part of the question. The tougher part is this. Who is a Sikh? Because I have walked the Indus River. I walked the Indus from Tibet till Karachi in a 12-year journey. And when I get into these pockets in, let's say, in Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, let's say like Swat region, Mingora, Southern Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, there are people, I'll take names. Like in today's East Punjab, you will not accept them, but this culture is an Indus culture. Names like Bansri Lal, Santosh Kumar, Kamal Rajput, Dada Reva Chand, they all don't wear a turban, but they're all believers of Nanak. And many a time, and I've spent time with these people. And sometimes I say they are better Sikhs than the Sikhs of East Punjab. So these are the small people who are left in these pockets. I'm not trying to demean anyone, don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to make us reflect that these people who are left in these small pockets, when I look at their practices, I say, wow, you guys have become inwards. We will not accept you by our definition in East Punjab, but they themselves consider to be believers of Nanak and proudly say that we are a part of the Sikh culture. This is the Nanak Panthi culture of the Indus region. So if you count that number, I would say there are more than 500,000. So the number is between 11,000 to 500,000.
Yeah. So I think you've answered the follow-up question also that was from Vakil Kulvinder Singh about how many Nanak Panthis. So thank you for that. And
so can I just stop here? If for the people who get interested in the Nanak Panthi word, when you go and search for Peering Soul, Peering Warrior on my YouTube channel, look for a presentation, Nanak Panthis of Indus. There is a talk that I've given. It's in Punjabi also. There is one more talk in English also. Look for Nanak Panthis of Indus. And I've given the whole evolution of their history and where we are right now. Hear those two talks, either in Punjabi, one talk, either in Punjabi or in English. And then there's another talk, which is a very long talk, which is about 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's a podcast with Amit Verma. It's titled Nanak Was Here. Hear that and you'll find many aspects intertwining. It's like a lassi that you'll drink with many aspects coming together. And these cultural aspects of the Indus Belt, you will understand better in that talk, in that discussion on the podcast.
yeah, so that podcast, if you're interested, is called The Seen and Unseen, and it is with Amit Verma. And I just do want to add in here, Amardeep, it's how, the boundaries that we have created for ourselves, for identities. And I met with Salima Hashmi, who's a very leading activist in Lahore in Pakistan, an artist herself. And I will never forget what she said. And she has said this publicly to some people who were trying to define that this is a heritage, only the Sikh heritage. So why should we take care? And she announced to them that we are all Sikh. I am Sikh. So that was such a profound moment. That's how we look at these and these boundaries that we have created are really all in our own minds. So there is one more question that that is from Satinder Singh. And he asks, do you see another Amardeep coming to pass the baton to? Amardeep? I think there is a technical glitch. So I can, in the meanwhile, recite a few verses that one of the viewers has sent us, which is relevant to this question. This is Anupam Batra, who says, हजारों साल नरगिस अपनी बेनूरी पे रोती रही, बड़ी मुश्किल से होता है चमन में अमरदीप पैदा. So I think that's a wonderful acknowledgement of all your work. And I think with this, we will come to an end of our session, which has been very engaging with Amardeep Singh. And I do want to pitch in for our next show, which will be on Saturday, September 12th, 2 weeks from now. You can see it on the flyer. And we will hear from Namita Jaspal, a conservation specialist, who will share her experiences working on restoring Sikh heritage, including the frescoes at the Darbar Sahib, and restoring the Chola Sahib of Guru Har Gobind, the 6th Guru. So please mark your calendars for September 12th, 10 a.m. And I think, Amardeep, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I got bumped off. Did I miss a question?
So the question was, do you see another Amardeep coming up in the next few years to pass the baton to? And so I'll let you answer that.
I mean, what's so great in Amardeep? I'm just a human being, and no one is indispensable. All I say is, I hope I can inspire many more to take on these tasks, irrespective of your faith, irrespective of your cultures, irrespective of what domain you are in. I hope you become passionate about these pursuits, because I spent 25 years in the corporate career and I was living and breathing in this dilemma of the questions that were inside me I was grappling with. There's nothing special about Amardeep. I'm just you. I mean, I hope you become many of such arms who can take on such challenges and such opportunities. And for that, all I can say is, to the point of repetition, I've said this many times, because someone who's asked this question, I think the person is coming from a point of view of probably getting some inspiration, right? So I'll just give a few words of inspiration out here from my own life's journey. I mean, I will say these are works of passion. They are very tough paths, very tough paths. Financially, they are very expensive. Till you've not built your credentials, people will not back you up. It's very tough. You have to live in an isolation for long, but that isolation has to be built in terms of your passions while you are doing what you are doing in the worldly life. Because if your life's mission is supposed to sprout, it will sprout at the appropriate time. So don't try and just jump because you like it. Build it up slowly. And for that, I would simply say, I often say this, don't follow your passion. Sorry, I'm talking about passion and I say, don't follow your passion. I always say, create your passions. And there's a lot of difference between following your passion blindly and creating your passion. When you start creating your passion, you become the passion. And when you become the passion, you will find in a few years, you will, you will squeeze it out. You will squeeze it out in a few, each initiative you will take, you'll squeeze it out, and you'll find your next purpose of life will emerge right behind you, and you will pick it up and you'll move forward, and that's how life will become interesting and keeps moving you forward. So I hope there are many of you who become not Amardeeps, but remain who you are and become passionate to create your own passions.
You must hear this verse. I don't know if you heard it when I recited it earlier. So this is from one of the viewers, Anupam Batra. He writes, हजारों साल नरगिस अपनी बेनूरी पे रोती है, बड़ी मुश्किल से होता है चमन में अमरदीप पैदा. So with that, I thank you, Amardeep, for this wonderful, phenomenal session today. And we will conclude today's presentation. I hope you have all enjoyed the tour as much as we have enjoyed presenting it to you. A huge gratitude and thanks to Tanmeet Gujral, the program director of the Sikh Foundation, for bringing us all together and making it all possible, and Rajinder Singh, whose support we can always count on, and also for creating the Sikh Foundation app, where you will be able to see some of the images we have shown today. And a big thank you to all of you for joining us today from all over the world, and for all who shared the event. We are ever grateful. We hope to see you all again on September 12th when we talk to Namita Jaspal. So please stay in touch with us on Facebook as the dates are announced for the other shows as well. Till then, stay safe, stay inspired in Chardi Kala. Sat Shri Akal.
Thank you. Thank you.